Hi folks, welcome back for another video in our chapter 1. And this video, we're going to talk about different ways of sampling, so different sampling methods. So let's take a look at this question. It says, a study is done to determine the average tuition that San Jose State undergraduates pay per semester. Each student is in the following samples is asked how much tuition they pay for the fall semester. What is the type of sampling in each case, right? So now we've got 5 different cases here, but before we read through them, I wanted to just ask you to go on back to your section 1.2 in your textbook. It talks about different kinds of sampling. But I wanted to show you also a little graphic that tells us a little bit about some of the random sampling methods, okay? And so in particular, I want to make sure we know that all the ones in the picture here would fall under the category of random sampling. Okay, so most of the times when people do studies, statistical studies, they do random sampling because that prevents something that we call bias. Okay, so it isn't like you just ask all of your friends the questions and they answer them, and then you are able to sort of generalize your answer because your group of friends may not be representative of all of the other types of people out there, right? And so when we are gathering data, it's really important for us to look for random sampling. Now, one of the downsides to random sampling, though, is that it can be a little bit more time consuming to get this kind of data than sort of a more biased way of getting it, where you just say, oh, like, let's just find the next 10 people that walk in the door will answer our question. That's something we would call a convenient sampling, but that's not random, okay? But with random, there's 4 different types. And I thought that this graphic was quite useful in helping us figure it out. But we have something called a simple random sample, where basically in a whole group of people all mixed together, we just kind of pick some people. So some random people. That's it. We don't really care. We just pick, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. That's it. Okay. Now, for some of us, especially maybe some of us type A, Virgo, people out there, we may be very uncomfortable with a simple random sample. We want to have like a systemic sample where we say, okay, we're gonna line everyone up, and then the second person, and then the 5th person, and then the 8th person. And so every 3rd person that I'm gonna sample. Right. And so that might make some of us feel a little bit better about our random sample, that there's some sort of system to it. But then we get down to these 2 types of samples. One is called a stratified sample, and one is called a cluster sample. And these can be confusing for folks to sort of distinguish between. But basically, in both cases, you take your population and you divide them into clumps. Okay, so you might think about it, you stratify them, or you divide them into strata, or you divide them into clumps. Okay, but the difference here is that in a stratified sample, in each clump, you pick, like, say, 1 person or 2 people. So you pick representatives from every single group. But in the cluster sample, once you've broken them down into, let's see, this one has 5 different groups, you say, I don't want this group, I don't want this group, I don't want this group. I'm just going to take these 2 groups of people. Okay, so that's sort of the difference between the stratified and the cluster. Stratified, we break them up into groups, but we still take people from every group. But the cluster, we're like, oh, we'll just take this whole group and that whole group. Okay, all right. So hopefully that was a nice review, clarification of our random sampling methods, but now let's come back and take a look at what we have here and actually identify each type. All right, so in part A, it says a sample of 100 undergraduates, San Diego State students, or San Jose students, is taken by organizing students' names by classification. That's, are they freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior? And then we select 25 students from each, okay? Now that should ring a bell as being a stratified sample. Stratified because we said, oh, here's all the freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors, and then we picked some from each group. We didn't only pick like freshmen and seniors, okay? All right, part B. Let's take a look at this. Random number generator is used to select a student from an alphabetical list of all undergraduate students in the fall semester. Starting with that student, every 50th student is chosen until 75 students are included in the sample. All right, so here are type A, super organized people, people who like lists, right? And if we go back down here, we can think about that as a systemic sample because we've got some sort of method to our madness. So we'll write in here that this one is systemic. All right. Moving on to C. So a completely random method is used to select 75 students. Each undergraduate student in the fall semester is the same probability of being chosen at any stage of the sampling process. Now, again, this actually might make those of us who like a system super, super nervous because this is what we call a simple random sample, right? And I just realized I didn't mean to say systemic here. I meant to say systematic. Let's go back and correct that. Systematic. Oh, I can't spell either. Systematic. Okay. All right, so we've got stratified, systematic, simple, random, and now let's take a look at part D. So the first year, sophomore, junior, and senior years are numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, and a random number generator is used to pick 2 of those years. All students in those 2 years are in the sample. And so if we look back down at our picture, that might remind us of our cluster sample, right? So we don't have a 5th one because we don't have a 5th year group of students, but we do have freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and we just picked 2 of those 4 groups. All right, so we've got cluster sampling for D, and let's take a look at this last one, E. An administrative assistant is asked to stand in front of the library one Wednesday and to ask the first 100 undergraduate students he encounters what they pay for tuition the fall semester. Those 100 students are the sample, right? And so this is sort of similar to that case where I say like, oh, make a survey and you just go out and ask your 10 best friends, right? That is something we call a convenience sample. And it is often has a lot more bias than these other methods, okay? So this is not what we call random. It's convenient for us because in one Wednesday, we can ask 100 people and be done, okay? All right, so let me get that all on one screen for you. But hopefully that was a little bit helpful in clarifying, identifying our different sampling methods. All right, let me know if you have any questions.